I asked him when people were starting to leave and stuff, and I said, "Hey, is it official?" "Well, we ain't got an official word now."
Ken Schrader was one of the last people to see Dale Earnhardt alive. He didn't speak much about what he saw that day in interviews, the media, or even to close friends. But if Schrader saw it all and said he knew immediately, why hadn't he ever told the whole story until now? What was he protecting? Or, more importantly, who? The day Schrader never forgets. Ken Schrader never talks much about that Sunday, but whenever he closes his eyes, he returns to the track field. February 18, 2001 marked the final lap of the Daytona 500. The engine's roar, the tight pack, and the sudden silence. Schrader was racing just like everyone else. He was side by side with Dale Earnhardt, one of the biggest names the sport had ever known. Then, everything changed in just a second. The intensity on the final lap was impossible to ignore. On one side, Dale Earnhardt was on his wheel, hell-bent on protecting his team's future, to keep their winning streak alive. Then it happened. Earnhardt's car brushed lightly against Sterling Marlin's Dodge at turn 4, the very last turn of the final lap. That tiny contact between the two vehicles sends Earnhardt's Chevrolet sliding off course. Earnhardt fought to regain control, trying to steer back onto the track. But just as he did, Schrader's Pontiac appeared out of nowhere. His black Chevrolet crossed in front of Schrader, and before anyone could react, their cars collided, dragging each other along the track.
Big trouble! Big wreck behind them!
In the blink of an eye, Earnhardt's car slammed into the concrete wall with such force that it seemed to shake the very track beneath them. But the thing was, this crash didn't look that bad. His car was traveling between 155 and 160 miles per hour, and the impact was violent, destroying the right side rear wheel assembly and ripping pins off the car's hood. And what's worse, the hood slammed against his windshield repeatedly. Each hit was more brutal than the last. When the race ended, Schrader climbed out, and the first thing he did was peer into Dale Earnhardt's car. His body language spoke words that his mouth couldn't. What did Ken Schrader see in the car that made him silent for a long time? The day racing changed forever. The Daytona 500 has always been a race for ages. In short, among all races, NASCAR's Daytona 500 holds the title as a premier event and a top series that draws massive media attention. What is remarkable about the Daytona 500 is that it kicks off the NASCAR season, an anomaly in the world of sports. NASCAR begins its annual schedule with this championship event after other significant sports have concluded theirs, so this race creates all the excitement for the whole season. For most of 1995 to 2000, Daytona 500 led TV ratings for auto racing telecasting, which surpassed the legendary Indianapolis 500 ratings. However, in 2021, the Indianapolis 500 secured the highest TV rating and audience numbers, which have become the most watched event for multiple years compared to Daytona. Since its run, the 2006 Daytona 500 continues to rank as one of the world's most significant sports TV events because it attracted 20 million viewers, making it the year's most watched race. However, although the 2006 Daytona 500 remains grounded as the most watched, the 2001 Daytona 500 remains the most talked about. This was not because of the victory or speed, but because of what was lost that day, and how everything changed afterward. It was like every other scheduled Daytona event. The racers were enthusiastic about the winners and who would race the fastest. Among these was Dale Earnhardt Sr. Dale never saw himself as reckless or trying to take advantage of whatever opportunity he got. To him, stock car racing was not a game for the faint-hearted. It was a brutal, high-speed contest that demanded strength, skill, and mental grit. He gave his all on the track, not because he wanted to intimidate anyone, but because he believed that was what the sport asked of him. Off the track, Dale was a completely different man. He was straightforward, honest, and preferred to speak directly and truthfully, no matter who he was dealing with. He didn't like drama, and he wanted people to know where he stood. Because of this fearless mindset, Dale's career took off. He had standout years, especially in 1988 and 1989. However, it was in 1990 that things started to peak. He won 11 races that season, including the highly respected IROC Championship. Although he dominated many tracks, the Daytona 500 remained out of reach. In those years, he got close to winning, but accidents shattered those dreams each time. However, the 2001 Daytona stood apart from the previous years. The stakes were high, and Dale was positioned to defend his team. This would be the race of a lifetime until another tragic accident happened. This time, it left him with no chance to race again. But something felt off while the crowd roared and confetti rained down at the finish line. Ken Schrader had pulled his car to a stop and was already rushing toward Dale Earnhardt's wrecked Chevrolet. He had much to say when he finally decided to speak up about the tragic accident. Schrader's truth. There's no way Ken Schrader will ever forget the image of Dale Earnhardt, lifeless in his car. Unlike many of the other drivers, who didn't find out until later that Earnhardt had lost his life in the wreck, Schrader knew immediately. The moment he looked into that battered number 3 car, he saw it, and he saw his friend. "What I saw in the car that day, that will stay with you," Schrader said. "I saw a friend in trouble. I didn't know for certain, but I would have bet. That sticks with you." It was a moment that would change everything for Schrader. The wreck started when Earnhardt's car made contact with Sterling Marlin's, sending Earnhardt's car up into the wall of Turn 4. After the vehicles slid off the track and onto the grass, Schrader didn't hesitate. He rushed straight to the wreck to check on his friend, and almost immediately he knew something was wrong, but he wasn't prepared for what he would see. Ann Schrader, his wife, reflected on that moment. Out of compassion for his friend, he went to the car, and I think maybe he saw more than what he bargained for. But despite the horror of it, she found comfort in the thought that perhaps one of the last people Dale saw was Kenny, a friend who was there for him in his final moments. After that, Schrader's focus shifted. He knew he had to find Michael Waltrip, who was still celebrating his first ever Daytona 500 victory. However, Waltrip didn't realize that Earnhardt, the man who had given him the car he was racing, had just died. Schrader was on his way to Waltrip when a TV crew stopped him and asked about Earnhardt. His face went pale, and his voice wavered as he lied, saying he didn't know what had happened. "I didn't think it was my place to tell the world," Schrader explained. However, even then, his fans, who watched him in interviews, could tell from his face and voice that something was wrong. When Schrader finally found Waltrip, he broke the news as gently as possible. "I didn't know the final deal, so I just told him it was big and Dale was in trouble," Schrader recalled. It wasn't the moment Waltrip had dreamed of, but Schrader knew it was something he needed to hear. It was Waltrip's biggest win, and Schrader couldn't leave him in the dark about the devastating truth. But the most challenging part was still ahead. Schrader knew he had to go home and talk to his daughter Dorothy, an Earnhardt fan who had spent time with Taylor Earnhardt, Dale's daughter. Dorothy had spent a week on the Earnhardt's yacht the summer before. Schrader recalled how Earnhardt had comforted Dorothy when she got homesick, pulling her into his lap and hugging her until she was okay. Now he had to break the news to her, and it wasn't easy. Dorothy had many questions and worries about Taylor, and Schrader's heart broke as he had to explain it to her. And then there was Schrader's grief. How would Earnhardt's demise change him? He wasn't sure, but he made a choice. He wouldn't let it break him. Schrader had been racing long enough to know this casualty was always possible. He ran on dirt tracks and small circuits, and he had seen it before. He had faced the sport's dangers for years, and while it hurt to lose a friend, he knew that he had to keep moving forward. "He knows things can happen in a race car," Ann said of her husband. "Because he's a racer, he has a very realistic attitude and has been able to cope with it." Despite rumors that Schrader might quit racing after what he had seen in Earnhardt's car, Schrader laughed them off. He wasn't going to let that define him. "When I walked up to that car, I thought about a lot of things over the next couple of hours," he said. But quitting was never on the list. For Schrader, racing wasn't just a sport. It was a way of life, and he wasn't about to walk away from it, no matter how hard the road ahead might be. The grave impact of Dale Earnhardt's demise. Dale Earnhardt Jr. knew how much his father's demise weighed on those around him, and he was happy that Ken Schrader, of all people, was the one who had to carry that burden. "I feel pain for you to have to carry that memory, but you carry it for me. You carry it for Kelly, Dad's family. You carry it for anyone who's ever cheered for him," Junior said. "It's a secret that you'll keep to your last breath. Kenny, I know you sometimes wish you weren't the one, but I'm glad it was you, and I appreciate who you are and the friend you've been to me." During a throwback episode of the Dale Jr. Download, he shared these heartfelt words as he recognized the heavy toll Schrader had to bear from that fateful day. Dale Earnhardt Jr. could have easily gone down the wrong path in those difficult moments, but thankfully he had the right people around him. "Just that little gesture to give me the most on Kenny Jones. A couple of drivers in the last couple of decades gave me some great advice in particular times," Junior added. "Just the small thing. You knew it was a big thing to put Kenny with me. You knew how good a person Kenny was. You knew how important he was in your life and how important he would become in mine." Those words of encouragement would shape Junior's future in ways he never expected. The next year, Dale Earnhardt Jr. took the wheel of the iconic number 3 car and won the Daytona 500, a victory he would later call his tribute to his father. It wasn't just a win for him. It was a symbolic last hurrah for the 7-time NASCAR champion. But that's not where this story ends. Junior found himself defending Sterling Marlin, who had been wrongly accused of causing his father's tragic accident. Through it all, Junior stood by Marlin, refusing to let the rumors tarnish the truth. Sterling Marlin's pain ran deeper than most people could understand. To him, Earnhardt wasn't just a fellow competitor. He was a brother. Their friendship went back in time, and Marlin recalled how Earnhardt was always easygoing, friendly, and full of jokes and stories. But the events of that day at Daytona left an indelible mark on Marlin, and worse. It's been decades since Earnhardt's fatal crash, yet the accusation that Marlin was responsible still haunts him. When news of Earnhardt's demise broke, fans quickly turned their anger toward Marlin. Even when the facts were laid on the table, the rumor mill still spun a tale that pointed fingers at him, and the resulting grief from fans soon turned into real threats. One chilling message read, "I will take your life, Sterling," while others posted threats online and made constant phone calls to his workplace in Mooresville, North Carolina. Marlin and his family received more than just hateful words. They faced genuine fear for their safety. Eventually, Marlin felt compelled to speak out and clear his name. Marlin had avoided discussing the incident at first, not wanting to seem like he was defending himself, but as the anger and threats kept increasing, he knew he had to speak up. For the first time since Earnhardt's passing, Marlin addressed the situation from his home in Columbia, Tennessee. He made a heartfelt plea for people to reconsider everything they had heard and re-watch the footage. According to Marlin, there was no malice in what had happened on the track. "We were just racing," he said, "and the last lap was just like any other. I was up front, and things happened fast." From Marlin's perspective, it was a simple racing accident. Marlin, Schrader, and Earnhardt were in a 3-car formation, with Marlin at the bottom. As the other cars closed in, Rusty Wallace made a move that caused a slight touch between Marlin and Earnhardt's car, sending it off course. Marlin described how Earnhardt overcorrected, which was the last he saw of him. Despite the crash, Marlin managed to keep his car straight and finished 5th, a feat he described as pure luck. When you run across the apron at Daytona at 180 miles an hour, you usually don't come back, he said. Unfortunately, Earnhardt didn't make it back, and Marlin would carry the weight of that moment for years to come. Since his retirement, Marlin has found solace in the quiet of his Tennessee farm, away from the noise of his racing career. There, he has time to reflect on his career's victories and ups and downs. However, the memory of Earnhardt's tragic death still lingers, and it won't fade easily. While investigations later revealed the crash's true causes, which revolved around seatbelt failure and crash angle, Marlin still questions whether anything could have been different. The accusations and the fear he faced in the aftermath of that race have never entirely gone away, but over time, he has received support from those who understood what happened. All members of the NASCAR community unified to support him, while Dale Earnhardt Jr. led the way by publicly hugging him in front of the fans during driver introductions. Jr. had approached Marlin for a hug at North Carolina Motor Speedway during the introductory ceremony a week following the tragedy. That moment changed everything. The audience turned from jeering to cheering, and at that moment, hateful accusations against Marlin ceased. Despite knowing he wasn't responsible for the accident, Marlin still carries the weight of being there when history took such a tragic turn. Investigation began, and the question on everyone's lips was, will the findings help relieve the guilt lingering in his heart? Only time will tell. Further investigations and safety measures. Dale Earnhardt's tragic death in 2001 didn't just shake the NASCAR community, it changed the entire sport. In the immediate aftermath, the investigation focused on the failure of the seatbelt in his car. In the process, Bill Simpson, the founder of Simpson Performance Products, was thrust into the spotlight. He denied that any defect in the seatbelt caused the tragedy. Instead, Simpson argued that they had adjusted the belts for comfort, which wasn't recommended in the instructions. Some experts agreed that improper installation could have been the key factor, but that still didn't explain everything. Then, journalist Ed Hinton from the Orlando Sentinel took a bold step. He requested access to Earnhardt's autopsy records, which, under Florida law, were considered public. However, Dale's wife, Teresa Earnhardt, fought to keep these records sealed. After a legal back and forth, a compromise was reached. Dr. Barry Myers, an expert in crash wounds from Duke University, would be allowed to review the autopsy materials. But what Dr. Myers found shocked many. It wasn't just the seatbelt failure that caused Earnhardt's tragic accident. His assessment revealed that Earnhardt's demise was also a result of unrestricted head and neck movement after his unrestrained car moved with excessive force. Hence, the belt's improper installation could not have changed the likely consequence of this fatal accident. His findings lined up with what other experts had suggested. Dr. Steve Olvey, a medical director for CART, and crash expert John Melvin from Wayne State University both agreed with Myers's conclusions. This brought relief to Bill Simpson, who had been under constant pressure. By July 2001, however, Simpson stepped down as president of Simpson Performance Products. The controversy surrounding the seatbelt failure had taken a toll. However, he eventually returned, launching Impact Racing products after his non-compete clause expired. Meanwhile, NASCAR launched its investigation, which didn't wrap up until August 21, 2001. The report confirmed multiple factors in Earnhardt's crash: contact with Schrader's car, the high-speed impact, and the seatbelt failure at that angle. But one thing remained unclear. Would Earnhardt have survived had he been wearing a head and neck support HANS device? NASCAR couldn't say for sure, but it became clear that the lack of the device played a significant role in his fatal injuries. As a result, NASCAR decided to implement black box crash recorders for all vehicles to improve understanding of driver crash forces during future accidents. However, despite the findings, NASCAR didn't rush to enforce the HANS device for all drivers. Mike Helton, NASCAR's president, made it clear that they wouldn't make snap decisions based solely on emotions. Still, by October 2001, tragedy struck again. ARCA driver Blaze Alexander lost his life in a crash at Charlotte Motor Speedway. The timing was eerie as Dale Earnhardt, Dale's son, was racing in the same event. With this crash, NASCAR found it impossible to delay safety reforms any longer. By October 17, 2001, NASCAR required all drivers in its top 3 series to wear either the Hans or Hutchins device. A few years later, in 2005, NASCAR phased out the Hutchins device, making the Hans system the mandatory choice for all drivers. But the safety changes didn't end there. NASCAR also began installing safer barriers, which included softer walls designed to absorb impact energy at all the tracks used in top-level races. These barriers have been credited with reducing injuries during big crashes. At the same time, NASCAR started developing a new car with even more advanced safety features. The Car of Tomorrow, COT, debuted in 2007 and was used until the Gen 6 car replaced it in 2013. The COT introduced numerous safety upgrades, including better impact protection and more driver space. Today, all the COT's safety upgrades, such as improved impact protection and more driver space, are carried over to the Gen 6 design. These changes are still saving lives today. Dale Earnhardt's tragic demise was a turning point in NASCAR. The lessons learned from that tragedy transformed the sport's approach to driver safety. Those safety features, like the HANS device and the advanced car designs, helped save Ryan Newman's life during his terrifying crash in the 2020 Daytona 500. Earnhardt's legacy is still felt in NASCAR, every race, and every driver who puts on their helmet. What came from his loss changed the sport for the better and will never be forgotten. On the other hand, Ken Schrader stayed silent for so long because that day's weight never left him. When he finally spoke, it wasn't just about what he saw, it was about everything that changed after. The belts, the walls, the cars, and even the way NASCAR treats every crash today. But then, are the safety upgrades and the lives saved enough to compensate for the tragedy? Will the memory of Dale Earnhardt ever stop shaping the future of this sport? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Before you go, explore the other videos on your screen.